Hi, my name is Eric, and I'd like to welcome you to our Thrifty Survivor YouTube channel. And today what I'm going to be doing is a kind of a review on this Ykk Tactical IFAK pouch. Now, IFAK is an acronym actually that stands for Individual First Aid Kit, and essentially that's what this is. Now, the contents are not included with the pouch. Essentially this review is more on the pouch, but I am going to be getting into the contents just to kind of give you all an idea of at least what we feel as are good things to throw into an IFAK pouch. Essentially an IFAK pouch differs, or an IFAK kit differs from a first aid kit in that this is geared more towards being able to handle more traumatic type of injuries. It could be severe lacerations, gunshot wounds even. And I've included some things in here which actually can handle some of that. Now I understand most of y'all aren't EMTs, aren't surgeons. I'm not either. But it's always a good idea to have some of these items on you. If you're unsure as to how to use them, I would suggest that you get some instruction on that. If you can afford to go take some EMT courses, that'd be great. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not at that point right now, but you can get a lot of information just by watching, for instance, Skinny Medic on YouTube. He's a guy. He's an actual medic, and he gives some good tutorials on how to, for instance, how to use tourniquets, that type of thing. Anyway, all I'm trying to say is it's a very good idea to get as much instruction as you can on how to tend to traumatic type of wounds. And I'm just being open with you. I'm not the expert on that, but I carry this stuff and I've instructed myself as best I can, and I hope I'd be prepared if the time came that I'd actually need to use them. Anyway, now let's get to the review. Again, this is the Ykk Tactical IFAK pouch. Okay, kind of had to do a little retake there because I was getting everything out of screen. Now, what I want to discuss is, again, why I got this little pouch. And by the way, it mounts on the front of my my Ykk Tactical IFAK. I paid, I believe it was $4.95 on Amazon for this. And the reason I got it is just to give myself a little bit more room. You don't have to get one of these, but I just thought it was a good idea. I threw my tourniquet inside of it, and a tourniquet takes a little bit of room. I felt it was a good idea to have a little bit more room for it. Now, as to the tourniquet that I personally am using, it's a Recon medical tourniquet. It's a cat type tourniquet. Basically the main difference is it's not made by the big name, and it costs half the price. I did my research on this. I looked at the reviews. I found that even some of our medical, professional medical units are using them. EMTs are using them. Some of your military units are actually using this very one. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. And at half the price, it's what I chose to go with. Again, we're Thrifty Survivor, not Expensive Survivor. So anyway, enough on the tourniquet. Again, the review is more on the pouch, but I'm going to mention a few things here that I think you want to include. One is a simple thing like a Sharpie. Now, again, I'm going to have to get back into the tourniquet here to indicate why. When you apply a tourniquet, you're really cutting off the circulation to the limb below it. And I'm not going to get in on how to apply these. I may do that at a later video, but you always want to write the time that you put the tourniquet on. The reason for that is if the tourniquet is left on the limb for too long, the individual could actually end up losing the limb. They'd have to amputate. And we really want to avoid that if at all possible. Now, my thought on that is it's better to save a life and risk losing a limb than to not try. But Generally, you're going to have maybe a couple hours or so that the tourniquet can stay on the limb. before, before it reaches a point where they'll probably end up losing the limb. You write the time on there, and that lets the hospital know when it was applied, gives them an idea of what they need to aim for. Anyway, enough on that. Other things I threw in here, I've got just a little Schrade knife. It's always a good idea to have a knife, actually just at any time. But with an IFAK kit, you never know if you have to remove clothing to access the wound or whatever else. You might need something just to cut the bandages, bring them down to size, whatever. Anyway, it's always a good idea. So all of this actually could have fit in here, but I'm kind of picky about those things. I don't like a tight squeeze. So now let's get into the actual IFAK pouch. One thing I'm going to mention is this is a rip-away pouch. And what's really nice about this is most of you probably know what Molle Webbing is. If you've got a tactical backpack, it's likely to have Molle Webbing, and what it's designed for is so that you can attach other things, other pouches for instance, on the outside of that pack or backpack. And that's what this is designed for. Molle Webbing is just basically this webbing here, and generally it's going to go from left to right, and then your little actual straps kind of weave in and out, and it mounts securely on your pack. Problem with that is a lot of people will either put that, well, oftentimes it'll be on the back where they can't get to it. Some might wear it on their cummerbund or on their tactical belt on the side. If you run into a situation where you have to work on yourself, or you want to allow someone else to use this, it's not very convenient when it's attached to you. So what they've done is this little handle here, you just, for instance, I'm just going to say that it was on my belt, and I'm sorry I went out of screen there, but anyway, let's just say my belt is going through here. This is attached to your belt. Now you've got it. It's very secure. One thing that I probably should have shown you before I took it off the pack is this little belt here clips around your pouch so that it is not going to fall off. But honestly, that's a lot of Velcro there. You'd have to be extremely unlucky for that to pull off in the first place. But there's that additional security of this being wrapped around your pouch. So if you lose it,
the sound of the Velcro tearing would be a dead giveaway.
yeah, really. you got a good point there, John. Anyway, now on the top, you've also got this little strap here, which is also Velcroed on. Pulls off, and that protects your zippers. What I really like about that is, now these, by the way, are Ykk zippers. So some of you who've done your research on zippers know that that's a good quality zipper. It's not likely to break on you, and it's a smooth running zipper.
No rusting?
Well, no, these don't rust. Now, Ykk does also make some metal zippers, but these particular ones are not. These aren't going to rust on you. But on what I like, or actually the way I set up my IFAK pouch, is a lot of people will actually bring the zippers down to the side. The reason behind that, I think, most of the time is just because they're worried that it's going to come unzipped while it's, in this position. If you get snagged on something, it might get pulled down, and you might start losing some contents. And that's a good point. But if you're in an emergency situation and it's on your side, let's just say you decide to keep it on your belt, do you know which side those zippers are on? Or even if you rip it off, now it's facing in another direction. Do you know which side the zippers are on? And in a life or death situation where seconds count, that could make the difference. So that's kind of a long way of telling you that personally, I prefer having the zippers on the top. I always know, pull that off, and there you go. It opens right up. Enough about that. Now let's get into the internals of the pouch. And I don't know whether it's all on screen or not, But the way it's designed is you could hang it up on a tree branch, for instance, hang it up on a rear view mirror if it'll squeeze over one. Anyway, there's a lot of possibilities as far as how you can hang this up, and it will just open up and expose all the contents. Now, if you're working on yourself, in all likelihood, you're probably just going to turn it sideways. You've got everything laid out here where it's easy to access. And let's just get into some of the contents that personally I feel are important. Now, I happen to be a type 1 diabetic, so I always throw these little glucose tablets in here. Now, the nice thing about these glucose tablets is you may run into a situation where the emergency happens to be a diabetic, somebody who really is in having a low blood sugar, and you need to pull them out of it. Now, these, you got to be careful about them though. If the person is incoherent or getting to the point where they're almost unconscious, these might not be the best idea because they could choke on them. But if they're still coherent, they might be a little bit shaky, give them a few of these that you pull them out of it really quickly. I've used them multiple times. I've been a diabetic from the age of 2, so I think I know a little bit about that. Now that brings up another little item that I like to include in my IFAK kit, and not those, but these are real cheap. These are just your little alcohol swabs that I use to prick my fingers when I check my blood sugar. I picked these up at Walmart. Got 400 of them for, I believe it was like $4.95, something like that. They're real cheap, and I can tell you I don't throw 400 of those in here. Don't need that many of them. And yes, they do, they rip apart and they just open up like that. And now these aren't really the type of thing you're going to want to use to clean up your whole hand. Now I suppose you could, I mean, you probably use several of them, but for that reason, don't know where to put that. For that reason, I also picked up some of these Antiseptic Towelettes. Now you might think, well, he's starting off with a little stuff first. I'm just basically, the way it pops into my head is the way I'm going here. But anyway, these little alcohol towelettes are similar to what you might see in some of your I know KFC used to have these on hand where you could use them to get the stickiness off your fingers after eating that delicious chicken. Anyway, these are actual towelettes, and these are, you know, you can use these to clean your hands off before you work on somebody, or actually, almost maybe more important, is afterwards. You know, when you work on somebody, you never know what they might have. It's a good idea to sanitize yourself afterwards. Now, I'm just going to kind of toss things aside. It's probably going to cover the whole table by the time I'm done, but probably one of the most important things to remember, though, and I probably should have started with this. All right, I messed up there. I'm back. Anyway, one important item to have is your medical examination gloves. A lot of people will carry just your standard silicone gloves. Problem with those is there are people who have allergies to silicone, and for that reason I choose not to use them, and I would recommend you not use them. I just use these nitrile examination gloves. It's basically something that most people, for the very least, aren't allergic to. And I usually will pack a couple pairs of gloves in my IFAK kit, just in case, for instance, there's a, one ends up getting a hole in it, or maybe I want somebody to help me, and a pair for each. Anyway, enough on the gloves. Another little item here that I always like to throw in here is this, it's just super glue. Now, you might be wondering, what super glue, for what reason? It's if somebody's getting too talkative, you can seal their mouth shut. So it's a very good idea. No, it's not actually what I use it for. And it's not like I use it, I've actually never used it for this, but I know a lot of medics have actually used super glue to kind of seal up a wound when there's no stitching available, no, basically better methods for closing up a wound. And I mean, I wouldn't use this for an extremely traumatic wound, but for a laceration where it's, you know, to the point where you might be thinking about stitches, super glue will seal it shut. It dries in like 15 seconds, so you don't have to hold them together for too long, and then you can move on to other areas if need be. Anyway, just a little tidbit there. Thrifty. I picked these up at the dollar store, and there are 5 of them. So basically individual use. So here's another pair of nitrile gloves. And okay, oval eye pads. Now I got a couple of them in there. Hopefully I'll never need to use both of them or even one of them, but just a nice thing to have. Different types of Band-Aids. These are basically for like knuckles or fingertips. The terminology actually escapes me right now, but anyway, little ouchie boo boo type things, little triple antiseptic ointment. These are just things. I'll just be frank with you. I went on Amazon and picked up a kit that included a basic emergency or basic first aid kit. It was kind of middle of the road. You know, it was able to handle some of your more major injuries and your ouchie boo boo type things. I believe I picked it up for $29. The reason I did that is it's just a good way to get most of the things you're going to need for just your basic needs, and that's where a lot of this came out of. One thing I didn't mention yet is this Cpr Mask. This actually came in that kit, and it's one thing that I think is a very good idea to have if you don't know how to do CPR. Obviously there's courses out there that you can take. You can save a person's life. This just prevents you from catching anything they may have if you have to perform CPR. Very good idea. Another knife, as if I needed another one. A little Swiss Army knife. Threw that in there. Doesn't take much space. You never know, I might lose this. This one's brightly colored. Unlikely that I'll lose it. I also have little, what do you call these, John? Little clips.
Safety pins.
Safety pins, yeah, diaper pins, you know. Anyway, I just threw some of these in a little SD card pack. They fit in there, they don't rattle around too much, and they're not going to open up and poke anybody. Threw those in there, and you would use those for your ace bandages, for instance, if you need extra ones. Basically, that's what that's for. And good time to mention ace bandages. Obviously, always want to carry some of those. They got multiple purposes. And these are your compressed gauze here. Now this little compressed gauze came with that kit that I mentioned. Also has some safety pins in there, but there's only 2. You never know, you may need more. And let's see, what else have I got here? Little item that I think you're all pretty familiar with, hand sanitizer. Personally, this is probably what I would use to sanitize my hands before and after you know, working on somebody, or even before I work on myself, you know, because you never know what your hands have been into. You're not applying this directly to the wound. If you do, you might get punched, you know, because it's going to sting. And it also, one thing a lot of folks aren't aware of is that when you use alcohol or hand sanitizer, which does contain alcohol, those types of things, you really don't want to apply that onto a wound. I mean, it's one thing if it's a minor wound, but definitely not on a severe wound, because it actually will deteriorate the flesh or the tissue, and that's really not what you want to do. Best way really to irrigate a wound is just basically distilled water or saline solution such as this. This, by the way, also did come with that kit. Other items, just your regular rolled gauze. And let's see, what have I got in here? Burn dressing. It's a good thing to have. Now, one thing about burn dressing is well, anyway, it's just a good thing to have for burns. There's something else I was going to say, but I can't remember what it was. I got some more antiseptic gauze here, trauma pads, and these are just basically large pads that you will place directly on a wound. And generally, what you're going to do, you might wrap some of this gauze around it, keep it in place. And I've got 2 of those. These are pretty good size ones, by the way. These are 5x9s. I think that's a good size, but also got some smaller ones here. These are 3x3s, 12 ply. You know, I don't have to get into any details about those things. A little bit of tape. Now, I stuck it in here because otherwise I'd lose it. But it's just a little Ziploc bag. I threw it in there. Keeps it nice and convenient. I know right where it's at. Your Band-Aids. Don't have to explain how to use those. More sterile gauze. Trauma shears. Now these, again, if you're getting into a situation where a person's got a severe wound, a lot of times it's going to be under their clothing, and you can't access it without actually cutting the clothing off that's covering it. These trauma shears, that's what they're for. I picked these up on Amazon for, it was under $7. It was, I believe, $6.95, something like that. These are actually stainless steel, not very expensive, but there are some that are even like $2 or $3. So if that's too much for you, as long as they're halfway, well, yeah, the knife will do the job, but you don't want to cut somebody either. So the nice thing about trauma shears actually is they've got this little lip here, so that you're just not going to cut the individual. I mean, obviously, if you cut them with the knife, that might not be a good thing, but it's better than nothing. So knives are always a good handy tool to have. Something else that I have here in addition, and I'm not going to rip it open because it's the only one I have left right now. This is an Israeli bandage. This actually can also serve as a makeshift tourniquet. And it's got other purposes as well. It's a bandage. It basically can do the same thing as this gauze here,
Ace bandage,
or the Ace bandage rather, only better. It's got basically some a little system there where it will actually secure itself to itself. Like I said, you can also use it as a tourniquet. But it's rather difficult to apply it to yourself, and that's another advantage to this type of tourniquet. These, you can actually apply it on yourself, and I'm not going to get into that right now. And I think this might be the last item here, is a
survival blanket.
Thank you, John. If it weren't for John, I can't tell you how many things I would have forgotten. But yeah, this survival blanket. One thing a lot of people don't even think about when a person is going through a traumatic injury is a lot of times they can go into shock, or they lose a lot more body heat than they would if they were healthy. Now, obviously, if it's in a cold situation, you're always maybe going to be thinking about that, but it could be 80 degrees outside, and if a person is losing a lot of blood, undergoing a traumatic situation, it might be a good idea, once you've treated the wounds, to wrap them in one of these, just to keep their body heat in there so that they don't lose it. I'm going to go ahead and ask John, did I forget anything?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
All right. So I guess that's going to about wrap it up for today on this Orca Tactical IFAK pouch. And what I'd like to do now, though, is I want to thank you so much for watching our channel. And if you'd be so kind, please like, subscribe, and comment. And be sure to check out, actually, one thing I forgot to mention is I'm going to be providing links to almost everything here. Now, obviously, these little items are in that little kit that I told you about, but I will be providing a link for it, a link for the Orca Tactical pouch, even this little pouch, the tourniquet. All these, most of these items at least, are going to be provided in links below. And if you like the content that we're providing for you, please visit our Amazon affiliate site. It's thriftysurvivor.com, so it's easy to remember, thriftysurvivor.com, and we'll have a lot of other items in there that you might be interested in, but that helps support our channel. We're Amazon affiliates. We get a little bit of a commission anytime you make a purchase off of Amazon through our site, but it doesn't jack the price up for you, just so you know. I want you to be fully aware of that. Amazon already has that built in. So thanks again for watching. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.